This week on Peaceful Co-Parenting Podcast.
It's better for a child to have two parents who are kind of compromising and doing something in the middle than it is with, each parent having a perfect idea, quote unquote, perfect idea of what their child needs, because that's very confusing.
Welcome to Peaceful Co-Parenting Podcast, where we discuss strategies and tips to improve your co-parenting situation, especially if it's high conflict. I'm Bianca Balogh, co-parent, mother, and entrepreneur, creator of Peaceful Co-Parenting Messenger app, and believer in turning challenging situations into something positive. This week, we're joined by Kristin Little, a mental health specialist and counselor specializing in helping adults and children adjust to major life transitions, including divorce and separation. She's a certified child mental health specialist and has specific training and experience working with child and adolescent mental health, including emotional, behavioral, educational, and parenting issues. Furthermore, she is trained in collaborative divorce and mediation, which I think is a really unique and great mix. Thank you so much, Kristin, for being with me today.
You're very welcome.
So let's start off with just anything to add about you.
Well, I think it's probably important to add how I got into the field. And so I was a therapist. I worked in kind of clinic work and usually with children. And so then I went through a divorce, and it was a collaborative divorce. I had never really heard of it. But when I went through the collaborative divorce process, I realized how much I really yearned to know about what to do as a parent, how to manage my own emotions, and then help my child as well. And so this was kind of a natural fit. So I became what is known as a child specialist in collaborative divorce. I don't necessarily only work with people in collaborative. It just means when you work with somebody, with me, that you agree to not take any of the information that we discuss or from your children or from, your parenting partner, that you take it to litigation unless both people are in agreement with it. So that's pretty much where I am right now. I do a private practice therapy with clients and general public, and I also do the child specialist coaching piece as well.
Okay, so do you work more with adults or with children, or would you say it's about 50-50?
Probably 50-50. In my private practice, I usually work with children, older children. I really like adolescents.
So what children have the most difficulty adjusting to two-home family life?
That's a difficult question to ask, but it's a very good question. Let's back up a little bit. There's two types of changes. One is adjustment. That's really just normal. If you're a parent in divorce, you're adjusting. And so your children are going to need to adjust too. And then there's a different process that we really want to look at. And it's for when children are really struggling, when they're emotionally actually getting kind of hooked into some issues that really do need attention. So no child will tell you, I love going back and forth between homes. Never, ever, ever. That's something that they have to adjust to. But when we get into issues where children are struggling in their relationships, struggling with their kind of identity, struggling with their attention, all those things, we really have to look at it and go, is this adjustment or is this actually really problematic? For younger children, what you're going to see is them maybe regressing. Everybody, actually, all children, but mostly younger children, you're going to see them kind of step back. I call it stepping back into the warm cozy. They may start sucking their thumb again. Older kids may kind of do, just maybe baby talk, maybe kind of cuddle in. It's just that we're trying to get back to that safety, that safe place. And so it's not something really to worry about. It's really just they're going to come back out of it once they feel more comfortable. Older kids, you're going to see other things. Now, this isn't a bad thing. I mean, you're going to see teens focusing on their friends because they have kind of a little bit of escape valve there. It's not problematic. It's only problematic if you're also really seeing a lot of other things. And I'll probably talk more about that later.
So some of the things that it sounds like you just mentioned are more normal adjustment and not of concern. But what are some other signs that you see and symptoms in your kids that would be concerning?
It's not even just the specific sort of behavior. It's also how long has it been going on? The duration. Have you guys been divorced for a year and you're still seeing this stuff? Even normal sort of, adjustment stuff, that would be something that's problematic. The severity, anger is normal, but are you seeing a child so angry at a parent that they're refusing to go and This isn't, in the beginning phases. This is kind of down the road. I think, how I would like to answer this is I'd like to back up a little bit. And I'd like to talk about how I generally see people in my practice, how they come in for the child specialist work. And what I'll say is that actually I see parents first, because bringing a child into therapy when you haven't really looked at how the parents are interacting is really kind of the wrong direction, putting the cart before the horse. Because any of us, any human being is going to have a reaction when things are really, unsettled, chaotic. I always meet with parents first because I want to make sure that they know what their role is in this, and that is to do the best that they can to actually clean up maybe some of the issues, some of the conflict or logistical issues, to make it easier on the child. And then we want to really look at what is important for a child.
That makes total sense, that you would start with the parents to really get to know what the situation is so that you can perhaps know better what to look for in the child. What happens when you just have one parent who's wanting the therapy and the other parent, say, doesn't want the therapy for the child?
That's always really difficult. So whether you're going through the divorce or whether it's post-divorce, if one of you doesn't want your child to go to counseling, you're going to be in for a battle. And that would be what I would call the stuff you need to clean up. If it takes you so long in order to just get your child some services, the child is actually missing out on getting their needs met. First of all, what I do is I really try to make it safe for both parents, and to talk to me and then maybe see what the issues their child is bringing up. So that's why I have the agreement that we don't take this anywhere that both parents don't want to. I also try to be really clear about how I'm there to give solutions. I'm not judgmental. So I think the first thing is if you're having trouble, try to stay calm and really ask what are the concerns and really, really listen. If you can't get a parent and the other parent to go to co-parent counseling or get your child some support, then go yourself and get as much as you can information on how to parent and how to support your child as you can until hopefully you can get your child into some therapy.
That's a great idea, to go ahead and start with yourself, because you can get a lot of skills and tools that you can then bring to your child and kind of go that route if you can't start with double parent involvement from the beginning.
The thing is that some of these difficult issues, they look like fear. So a child's fearful. So you have to actually calm yourself and maintain a period of time where you are regulated. And by regulated, I mean, you're kind of in control and grounded in yourself. You're not kind of having your emotions wash all over your child and kind of, seeing them through your lens, kind of keeping the course for a while. If it is a parent issue, if parents need to take care of that problem, then I'm doing the child a disservice by saying, hey, there's this big problem and, maybe I can help you cope with it. Maybe they don't need to cope with it. Maybe the parents can be really encouraged to actually take that off their plate. Children don't have the capacity to really change so much about, what's happening to them. They're kind of stuck in their families. They can't go, hey, I'm leaving. I'll see you. They can't actually sit at the negotiating table. So they are a bit stuck. And so I want to make sure we're cleaning up as much as we can on the parent end. And whatever's left over and it's not going to change and parents are really trying, that's when I kind of go in. Now, some things will kind of fall outside of that. And that is when the duration is really long period of maybe kind of living your new, family structure, and it's still an issue. Or when it is rising to kind of a safety issue or something that's very significant. And we're talking eating disorders, self-harm, suicidal ideation, or kind of just this real sense that your child is very, is their mood is at the point where it's more than just adjustment, sadness. It seems to kind of be taking away their friends and their joy. That's when you probably want to see somebody no matter what. It is normal for a child to grieve. And so just because a child's sad, you don't want to bring him into therapy, because that's for you parents to do, because you're the greatest support.
It sounds like you'll work with a whole family then. So do you like to be able to work with both parents and then in case you need to the child?
Yes. So I actually don't see children in divorce. Like if a parent comes up and say, "Hey, we really want to get our child in therapy." Number one, you have to have both parents' permission, and if they're under 13. But I do see the whole family and the child specialist. So I'll pull them in a different way. I'll say, I want to make sure that they understand what their role is. They also understand what I'm going to be gathering from their child and how and for what purpose. And I want to make sure they're ready to hear what I have to say. And then I meet with a child and I meet with them individually and I talk with them about just what's helping, what's hurting. I talk to them about how they understand what happened to their family. Pretty direct questions, because it's not framed as therapy. It's framed of, your parents really want to kind of know what's important to you. You don't make the choices, but it's really important to understand what's important to you. Instead of guessing, you tell me what you think is, or what you want me to know and what I can pass on to your parents. And thank you very much. And so I gather that information and then I sit down with the parents and I bring it back to them. That way, what we're doing is we're dealing with real information, not the information that may be kind of coming from, each parent's own emotional or perspective or values or interests, and say, this is how your child is feeling. These are the suggestions that I would have for you. And I think this is so important, because whenever parents are divided in a very basic level on how to support their kid, then that's going to be conflict. It's better for a child to have two parents who are kind of compromising and doing something in the middle than it is with, each parent having a perfect idea, quote unquote, perfect idea of what their child needs, because that's very confusing.
Oh, that's such a good point. I really want you to say a little bit more about that, because I think a lot of times we get stuck on the perfect solution or what we think is what they really need. And it's just our opinion, right? But there's always different ways of doing and accomplishing something. Can you talk more about it?
Yes, a lot of times you'll hear parents say, if you don't agree with my idea, then you must not care about the best interests of, our child. People want to avoid fear by having some sort of solution. So a parent will sometimes kind of grab on an idea, and it's really not likely that the other parent is totally not interested in the thing that or value that the solution has. So if you say, if you don't send our child to counseling, you don't really care about them. That's putting these two ideas together that actually don't go together. But they may have a different, maybe they're worried about how it's going to make the kid feel, or maybe they're worried about litigation. So the issue is that both parents probably are in more agreement than they think they are. But a child sitting there and watching this, and what a child needs most in the divorce process and post-divorce, but especially in that process, they need reliable, predictable, familiar relationships, routines, because that's how we calm ourselves down. That's how we get out of that fight or flight, flee or flock response, basically fear. So if we're warring over these things, we're actually really keeping our children from adjusting. If you're a parent who is locked into this, if there is a good enough solution, take it. And over time, be able to recognize the difference between what you really, really need, the ground level sort of gotta have it, and the things that you really would like, because perhaps you can have better communication with your co-parenting partner so that you can show them that you can compromise. Won't always work, but you're doing at least your best. There's no perfect solution to solve the fear and the anxiety of what you're going through. It's just something that is scary and hard.
So as a parent, when would you know to call up your co-parent and say, I think we should look into therapy for our child? What are some of the things that would jump out at a parent, or that maybe that they should be looking for, that would warrant that discussion?
So what I would say is, if you're a parent and hopefully you have a good, cordial relationship, or maybe you don't, but whatever it is, being able to start sharing those, what I call FYI, emails or some, FYI, Sammy said this, and this is my concern, just wanted to let you know, let me know if you want to talk about it. They may totally ignore you, but you're starting to float these things past them and you're not dictating what's going on, what the solution is. So the things though that I do think, if you're seeing some sort of issue, then I think that I'm always hesitating because parents got to meet together, because it does absolutely no good for a child to go into therapy. And even the therapist saying to a parent or, and hey, you guys got to do this. If you're fighting, if you can't hear what the child or the therapist is saying, you've just introduced conflict. It doesn't do any good. It actually makes it worse. So first of all, what I would do is I would keep stating kind of what it is that you're seeing. These are the things that I think children need help out of. The best people to help them out of it is a therapist or, coach that can help support parents to do this themselves, because they're the people that are there. The things that I think, number one, is if a child is in what we call the very young child, like say infants, if they're having difficulty regulating themselves over time, like all babies pretty much kind of have a preference for one parent or the other, or they just really have trouble in their sleep and wake patterns and eating patterns, that's normal stuff. But when you kind of are seeing a child not be able to, it's not resolving over time, you've got to tighten up that structure. Mm-hmm. For older children, if you have a child who it looks like we call it kind of hooked into predictable sort of, struggles in divorce. You've got a child who is really into those reunification fantasies, like that mom and dad are going to get back together again. This child's pulling parents' hands together at transitions. That's normal. You would think, any kid would wish for this stuff so that they wouldn't have to go through this pain. Makes sense. But parents need to be able to gently kind of help them let go of that so that they can move through this time and say, the way that parents are now and the way the family is okay. They don't need to wish so hard for something to resolve. Mom and dad get back together. This will happen naturally if they see that life kind of moves on and everything's okay. But children actively trying to take control, whether it's being really, really good or really, really bad, that's when parents may need to step in and start planting some seeds that, hey, we're not going to be getting married again. And we want to let you know that, it's going to be okay. We're look and showing them what is okay, really making that true. The child will start letting go. Older children, you're going to sometimes see older kids having attention problems. They're trying to sit in class and they're thinking about what's happening at home. That is normal. Of course, they're distracted. You may see their grades go down. You may see them even get into some tussles or breaking down in ways that you didn't see. That's just called grief. That's called worry. Adults do it at work. But if you see a child kind of really losing their way and letting go of sports and their friends and just, they may need some help, so that you don't want a child to be skipping big chunks of their development and having loss of their childhood. I always tell kids, how many times are you going to be a kid? And they go, once. And I'm like, so you need to go back to being a kid. Let your parents deal with this. You just tell them what you're having a problem with. And then I work with the parents, so that works out okay. I think with some kids, you'll see a lot of anger. Like a teenager would go like, why now? Why are you doing this? Like, because they're busy living their life and they're just about to launch and they don't want to worry about their parents. So that's normal. But when anger starts really getting in the way of their supportive and loving relationship, that's something to be concerned about. And so that can look like a loyalty conflict. Children will say, well, I heard mom and dad fight and, dad was really mad about, X. And so that's why they divorced. And then child's building this whole narrative about who's to blame. And one girl even told me, oh, I'm on mom's side of the divorce. And I'm like, oh, tell me more. And it was because she'd seen her mom crying really, really hard. She wasn't supposed to, but she's kind of looked down at night and saw mom sobbing and saw her dad kind of holding it together. And so she put, 2 and 2 together and said, oh, I know what's going on here. But they can take these adult problems and in their immature development, then they end up creating a strategy that isn't, it's above their pay grade. This is not their problem. How their parent is to them and how they are to their parent, that's what they should concern themselves with, not with the adult relationship. Parents have immense power to be able to go back and help their children through this with just a few words. If you're co-parenting and you have a good relationship where you can coordinate, this is something you share so that your children are hearing basically the same thing from each of you. It doesn't need to be carbon copy, but you start sharing, planting seeds and talking to your child about the story, about values, and about how things get handled in your family. If you don't have a relationship with your co-parent, then you do this. Share it if you can, float it by them. They may say nothing, but take a lot of care to not introduce negative information to your child about the other parent. There are some situations in which you probably do, like if a parent is just gone, there are times when you do have to explain things to a child so that what they're coming up with in their head is not worse, like my parent doesn't love me, when in fact that parent is actually struggling with addiction. That's something that to be very careful, and I would go and I would get some support on that. But a lot of these things, you don't ever have to say anything bad.
Mm-hmm. Got you. And so you had mentioned earlier about tightening the structure. So you were addressing younger children, and when they're crying a little bit out of the normal range, or they're having struggle with sleep and that kind of thing, you had mentioned tightening the structure. What does that mean?
So yeah, with younger kids, they're immature in their development, of course. And so their brain really relies on having things happening predictably. And so that means, as much as possible, following some of the same routine. This is not an opportunity, however, to go and interfere in the other parent's parenting. It doesn't have to be done exactly. That's just introducing conflict. It means seeing how you can kind of come, even with older children, how can you come to some agreement on maybe the basic rules of the home? Like you do your work before you get to play, or screen time, but again, not to the point where you're interfering with each other. But for younger kids, it could be just, sleep-wake cycles, food. You have to be much better communicators when you have a very young child. And so the best thing to do is for parents that you really do have to ground yourself. There's no way that you can really support a child if you're not in a place of being, grounded. That doesn't mean that you have to be all perfect. That means that you recognize when you're not, and you take some breaks. Being able to recognize that allows you to be able to step back out and be in the place you need to be, because children borrow our nervous systems. They're paying so much attention to us. The structure is, as much as you can, kind of looking at the daily structure, talking with your co-parent and seeing how much you can align, and letting go if you can't.
Yeah, so the continuing theme that I feel like I'm hearing is just flexibility. I feel like a lot of times as co-parents we'll get ourselves into trouble where we start to fight when we dig our heels in the sand, and it's like my way or the highway, and there's not that flexibility. And when it comes to our children, we can help them in a lot of different ways.
So you earn flexibility too. So part of it is that structure that you have in your parenting plan, or that is your structure to go forward in case you guys can't talk. But the more that you learn in this new trust, it's not brought from your old relationship, it's really earned. The more that you are able to see that the other person's not just going to go off, or steamroller you because they can, and that you're not going to do the same, that you're going to, really struggle and work together. That's when you get more flexibility. That's when you kind of are able to go and flex without introducing conflict. Basically, if you're not able to do that, then you do the best you can with what you got, and you use the skills and the tools, like your app, you use those tools to keep things running, and you keep your distance so that you're not introducing conflict.
Listening to you talk about some of the specific signs and symptoms from our kids as early as little ones all the way up to adolescence, is that it's okay and normal to a certain degree, and then it's not. Like when it crosses over into, now this might be a warning sign. I think it's hard for parents to recognize this is crossed over. This should be concerning me, and I think we need to I need to talk to my co-parent about it, or I need to talk to my therapist about it, or whatever. And I think it's a kind of a gray area where it starts to be a little confusing.
Yes, and that parenting is a gray area. It's a little confusing. So yes,
Totally.
divorce raises fear. Parents and children, change is fear. Everything that whenever we see something as new, our brain goes, uh-oh. If we can't place it, if we can't figure out what it means, like, oh, it's a roller coaster, then woo. But if it's something we're not quite sure about, it's always uh-oh. And that's normal. That's supposed to keep us safe. But when we live in a chronic sort of stress, fear place that begins to actually do something detrimental to us, whether it's in our body and also in our learning, everybody can, is growing and growing and changing, children especially, because children are learning when this happens, then this happens, and this is how I cope. And so when if a child sees, dad's crying, uh-oh, danger, I need to go in there and fix it, or I need to run away or something. And so the problem is that we really just want to make sure kids aren't constantly stressed out. And we want to make sure they're not afraid of things that they can actually handle or that we can handle for them. I do, again, try to really teach parents how to share this information carefully, and so that they're at least getting it to the other person, and that other person may be thinking about it without you watching over them, which is great, so that they can kind of mull it over. And but in the end, what's the relationship that you have with your child? That's the safety valve. So your child, let's say kids going through puberty, they're going to get a little kind of like pushing back on you because they're supposed to. But if you're in a two-home family, then sometimes there's a big gap where you don't know what the other parent's doing. Kids can kind of split the middle and go, you want to kind of have that conversation where you can know who their friends are and kind of keep in there, because things can get dangerous when they get some independence. So those are the things that you really want to watch out for, is to be able to maintain that relationship with your child, want to stay grounded so that you can have those good conversations. You don't want to shut down communication. For instance, when children are starting to kind of get snippy, in puberty, and they kind of go, mom, or, dad, is that you don't want to jump so hard on that language that you kind of shut them down completely. So it may be that you go, hey, that feels kind of not great. And I know that you are a growing, little teenager, but can you try again? And not getting super angry, addressing actually what the issue is, not assuming they even know, they're trying to figure out feelings and what to do with them, really is helpful. You want to keep your children close, but allow them some space.
Yeah, there's that balancing. There's that gray area, right?
Mm-hmm.
Keep them
Mm-hmm.
close, but
Mm-hmm.
give them space. It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's the balance.
Mm-hmm.
One question I had was about psychosomatic symptoms. I guess I was just wondering, can you talk a little bit about psychosomatic symptoms in your kids? And is that generally more for younger kids, or you see it in older children as well?
It's a really good question, because, and I probably should have addressed it when we're talking about some of the science, because children don't have the language. They don't have the conceptual sort of language experience with emotions to be able to explain it. And quite frankly, when we feel emotion, it's in our body, switching on our nervous system, and our stomach hurts, or we get tense in the face and our head hurts. So they're just really reporting what they're feeling. So this is where a lot of that tightening the structure that maybe children need, kind of to need the stability of the structure so that they're not so scared. They need that comfort in really concrete ways, like what makes you feel better? What can you do in these situations for yourself? Or can I give you a hug? Can I, rub your feet? Whatever it is that you do. Can we listen to some music that's starting to teach them some ways that they can actually feel better? But what's happening in their tummy or their head is oftentimes what we would call emotion. Yeah, I think that's something to pay attention to. It would be teaching some of those skills to help them cope. We call it normalizing. And that would be, oh, your stomach hurts. It might be from that test, or it could be, lots of things are changing. And sometimes that makes your stomach hurt. So here's what we can do. And just the comfort. It doesn't have to, they don't have to understand it completely. You can understand it as a parent for them and help guide them to maybe some soothing sort of activities.
That's great advice.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you so much for addressing that. You've talked a bit about fear. You've talked a bit about flexibility. And I feel like you've talked a lot about being strong as co-parents and dealing with our adult issues on the parent level, and really keeping the communication open with our children so that we can understand how they're feeling, how to help them, and how to guide them. I would say, in a nutshell, do you have any general advice for parents going through a divorce and how to help their children?
I think one of the first things is that know that you're going to come kind of undone. And this is, partly why I, wrote my book about more of the parenting experiences, because people were always saying, well, how do you get to that co-parenting, stuff? Really, it has to do with your own personal emotional journey. So taking care of yourself so that you can be in the driver's seat. Children need to see parents taking care of themselves. And I think once you do that, then you're on a much better plane to be able to, in the long term, make a happy kid. Because what kids want from us is they want happy parents. They want to know we're okay. So they can kind of go and do what they want to do. And I think that's what we really should strive for.
That's great. So you mentioned your book. Do you have any other resources that you'd like to share with parents that might be struggling with either that self-care themselves or helping their children?
Well, I did write No More Us, which is probably the saddest title in the world, but it really was kind of how it felt. Like, this is the point: if there's no more us and surviving and thriving a divorce, a separation you did not want. And there's a particular sort of pain that goes with that. So I wrote that because everyone assumes, because my former husband and I, we get on well. We have a complicated with, stepmom and other daughter and my son, and we have a complicated and loving family. And people always think that happened because we started out being all okay, kumbayaing, no, we did not. And there was a lot of emotion, but it was hard work. And so I kind of wrote that book so that people could see where the work was, the predictable places where you kind of come undone, and how to kind of maybe reorient yourself. That's one resource that I think is helpful for those people who are going through that kind of particular dynamic. The other one with Karen Bonnell is, this Step Parenting Handbook, that Step Parenting Handbook is also a really great one with Karen Bonnell. It's for blending families. Oftentimes you'll be introducing new members, and sometimes in the middle of a divorce process. Something to be done very carefully. And she offers some great guidance with also the other author, Pepper Now. There are lots of people who do what I do. And I just want there to be people to know that there are resources out there. You can call up and you can ask for help from a neutral party. There's a whole collaborative divorce community. And you can reach out, and there may be people who have been through this before, who are professionals who have some expertise in the area, because this is probably your first time. Ask for help.
Thank you so much for being here to lend your insight on this important issue.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to add, and how can people get a hold of you?
I'm at KristinLittleCounseling.com. But you can look there. And also you can look at the International Association of Collaborative Professionals. That's also a really great resource. You can search for collaborative divorce professionals in your community. So yeah, I'm glad to talk about something I feel really, really strongly about, building better families after divorce and helping our kids. So thank you.
Thank you, Kristin. Thanks for joining us this week on the Peaceful Co-Parenting Podcast. I hope the time was well spent and you got a lot out of the episode. If so, please rate and review the podcast. I would really appreciate it. If you're interested in sending me a feedback message, asking a question, suggesting a podcast topic or guest, or downloading Peaceful Co-Parenting Messenger as a tool for better communication with your co-parent, go to peacefulparentapp.com or see the links in the show notes. Have a great week, and as always, stay peaceful.